Now we have a problem. I forgot how many I've done. Those are feet. I like feet.
Oh, I love feet.
I like to do this. It's fun. Just kind of dip it in very gently, and that'll just lube it up a little bit.
All right, you gotta clap us off.
Come again.
You gotta do a clap.
It's to sync all the audio.
All the audio and the videos. He did great.
That was a good sound quality.
Thank you.
Great clap. So we're here not at Studio Lions. We're here at TJ's house.
Studio Choquette. That's a generous use of the term studio.
Dining room Choquette.
Dining room. You guys have been asking us to use the drum, and we told you we couldn't until we got heads, but here they are. And TJ is a master at tuning drums and putting heads on drums, so we're gonna use his expertise instead of my own. TJ, first question for the audience, why does it matter? Why do you need new heads? Why do you even need to tune a drum?
Yeah, so most drums come with stock heads. But obviously drum makers are good at making drums. They don't worry about making heads. They just make these little things or source them from someone. Just throw it on there so you can hit a little bit. But obviously, as you hear, that doesn't sound good. That sounds like a little Tonka toy or a tom. Right, so that's not what we want to hear when we play snare drums. It's made out of mylar generally, which is like an older material that they use to make heads. It's still used, but it just creates a lower, kind of warmer tone. Do I look at you or look at the camera? I don't know. Yeah, so it's naturally lower, it's naturally a little bit more resonant, and you just don't hear the articulation or the clarity that you need, like particularly when you play with a big snare line, 8, 9, 10 people. You want to hear it very clear. You want to hear kind of like this. And the point of drumline is to get 7, 8, 9 people to sound like one, right? Like that's generally our goal, and it's very difficult when your heads are that wide sounding and like the width of sound is woo rather than ka, right? It's a lot easier to make ka sound the same than woof. So that's kind of why we tune. And head makers obviously make heads that allow us to get a kind of higher, more articulate sound.
Yep. And we got heads from Remo just because we've worked both with Remo and Evans before. TJ has tuned more Remo than he has Evans, so we were just going with Remo here for this.
Correct. I don't know if I once heard a legend that there's apparently the same people that stamped this have been stamping it by hand for like 40 years. There's like 2 women apparently just go, boop. I don't know if that's their whole job. I don't know.
Do they hand stamp it, or is it like a button?
Again, I imagine with the times it may be changed, but that's just a legend I heard from Lance Kendall.
Yeah. You heard it on the internet. It's true.
It's true. That's what the internet's for, is true things.
All right, so we'll just get right into it. Step 1.
Yeah, all right. So step 1, you need to have a drum key, which I don't have on me because it's in my bag. So I don't know where that is. There's my bag.
What's the best way to do it?
Probably on the stand. That's a nice height.
What a great quick cut.
Yeah.
Where
are the scissors?
Scissors? Step 1.
Step 1. All right. So the stuff you need to at least tune like I do, which is you don't need all of it, but the thing you definitely need anywhere is a drum key. So this is a Pearl drum key. But essentially it's just a little key that allows you to get on these lugs and twist them around, right? And you're gonna struggle to find this in like a Home Depot or Lowe's. So normally you'll probably have to order online. That's the most important baby that you need. Number 2, this is for the guts down here. This is called the snare bed, or the guts, or the snares. So each one of these actually will tune a little bit, very similar to like a guitar, how you would kind of tune it. Down here, it's not a screwdriver. It looks like that is a Allen key, which we also have. So you need an Allen wrench to tune a Pearl. I also use a little bit of tape to kind of tape down some of the snares. That will kind of deaden it a little bit. It'll stop it from ringing quite as much, and it'll create what we call a drier versus a wetter sound, which I'll explain a little bit later. Another thing we can do, if you have scissors or a little blade, some drum companies have a lot of guts. A lot of the groups I use would kind of cut off 2 on each side just to dry it up a little bit. So really this will be very resonant and very snary. You kind of hear that sound, and if you kind of put some tape down or cut a few off, it'll kind of dry it just a smidge. So, all right, so the first thing you do, I normally start with a top head just because it's easier. Just go one by one and spin these babies off. right? You don't want to go all around in one line, because that'll essentially just create too much tension on one side of the head while the other is just sitting there, right? So if you make one side too tight, it'll sound a little weird, or it might pull the head. It might stretch the little threads in the head too much, and they can pop or just sound weird. So you can undo them or do them however you want. I normally do 2 at a time, so I'll just do 2 there, 2 here. You could use 2 keys for speed's sake.
A la Mark Hunter.
Yeah, I used to do that. I kind of stopped, but if you like 2, you can do that as well. So you can do exactly what I just did, except instead of going 2 at a time, you can literally just go this one off, move to the right, this one off, move to the right, that one off. To save you some time. There we go.
There we go.
Voila. And it's gone. Hope my hands look good for that B-roll.
Ooh.
Okay, so this is a decision that people have to make. Where do you want the logo, right? So Remo, Evans are all gonna have a logo here. Most people, I would say, probably put it up here on the front, right with the drum logo, because it looks clean. Other people put it at the back.
I don't like the back.
I've seen that.
Personally.
I prefer it over the gut bit right here. So if you see this little guy, that little snare mechanism, I just put the Remo kind of right in line with it. Also, it kind of looks cool. Secondly, it's a good checkpoint for where you need to go if you play at the edge. Just aim for these 2 little parts of the crown.
2 points of the crown, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good spot. It keeps you kind of on the diameter of the head. It keeps the sound the same. So that's what we do. That's kind of why I put it there. All right, so there's that. We do need to grease the bottom of these. I don't think I have any. That's not the biggest deal in the world.
I don't have any grease.
But if you have like white lithium grease or even something like a Vaseline, I would recommend probably putting it on the bottom of these. Just kind of dip it in very gently, and that'll just lube it up a little bit and let it kind of A, go on a little easier, and B, it'll stay lubricated for longer, so it'll be a little bit more durable the more you take on and off. But we don't have any here at my house. But again, if you're running a drum line or something like that, I would highly recommend white lithium grease. You just dab it on, and then it goes on nice and smooth. Looking good. All right, so here I'll kind of do an example of, you could use 2 keys if you want, and really all we're doing the first time is just spinning it until the lug is kind of just threading slightly, and it's resting on top of the head. We're not adding a lot of pressure. We're just making sure that it's kind of just putting the rim down just a little bit. So once it kind of just gets in line with the rim and it stops spinning freely, maybe give it a tiny little crank, rinse and repeat. All right, so we're on this. So this head, they came out with a couple years ago, and if you feel it, it just feels a little smoother and softer, right?
Yeah.
It feels like there's a little bit more give. And for me, the best thing about a snare drum is finding that perfect balance between what the Mylar head creates, which is that nice resonance, and what a Kevlar head can make, which is that articulation like this, right? But we don't want to hear our drum sound exactly like a tabletop. We want to still have it resonate, but just not too much to where it's cloudy or dirty. And I think this head does a great job with it. All right, so now that our top head is on, really what I do is I kind of just pound the middle of this. So I'll literally take my fist. That's kind of loud. But I'll just take my fist and just hit the center of the head. And what that does is it just makes sure that all of the stretch and all the tension is kind of distributed evenly, right? So when I hit it that way, it's just kind of pushing down in the middle, and it's making sure all the stretch, all the fabrics in here are kind of moving along the same way. And when you do that, it'll kind of, almost knock my lemonade off, that'd be bad. It'll kind of make these lugs a little more loose again.
Yeah.
And as you can see, like I can't spin it freely anymore, right? It's kind of on. So from here, I'm not really listening yet.
Yeah.
I'm not really listening, but I'm just feeling
What feels like that tension point?
Exactly, right? So I can kind of spin it fairly freely, and then once I feel like there's a little bit of fight, I maybe give it 2 quarter turns.
Quarter turn is from here to here?
Yeah, so this would be, I guess, a full 360 turn.
Yep.
You're not going to be able to do that too often, but the quarter turn is literally just 45 degrees.
Yep.
All right, so if I do...
90 degrees?
I think 90 technically.
Oh, absolutely. That's 90 degrees. That would be 45. That's an eighth turn. Yeah.
Yeah.
90 degrees. I can't do math. I did this,
Yep.
and then this one is really loose, so I know I made it there.
Yep.
And again, I just kind of feel until it fights a little bit, and then I just give it 2 quarters. That one's already pretty tight, actually. And again, you're not going to be perfect. Like, one might be a little tighter, one's going to be a little looser. At this stage, it don't matter. So, we just did another couple quarter turns. We'll do the same thing. We're seated. You can push it, you can hit it, whatever you want to do. So let's just get it up a little bit. I'm going to just give it 1 little quarter turn. That's my goal, but if one's a little looser, I'll give it 2. Alright, so I haven't even listened to it yet. Honestly, I don't care that much. I'm just getting it on, making the pressure similar all the way around. And again, we'll come back to this after we do the bottom and tune it up a little bit. But the thing you don't want to do too much is move too fast, too early, particularly when we get to the bottom head. If you start cranking that thing up too early, it's very possible it'll pull and pop right away. So you just have to make sure if you're putting bottom heads on in particular, you're being very patient, and you're not trying to make this thing sound good day one. Normally it's a 24, 48 hour process to make a drum sound good. So, alright, so that's the top head. We just take it off, put it on, put the logo where you want, spin it a little bit, make sure we're putting even pressure, seat it, do it again, seat it, do it again. That's all we need.
That's all we need.
Cool, that's all you need. Alright.
Bottom head time.
So we got the bottom head. We just did the top, and now we got the bottom. Same thing here, right? We got these stock heads on. They're too low. We need a head that can just create a little bit more resonance, a little bit more pitch over time, just to give us some nice tone. So there's a couple things down here on the bottom. These are called feet. These little black things. Some drums have them, some don't. But really, these are just here to protect the hardware on the bottom of the head. Those are feet. I like feet.
Oh, I love feet.
They help. Yeah. All right, so here is what we call the snare mechanism. So each one of these snares rattles every time you hit the drum. So when you hit the drum, the energy of the stick puts air through the top head, comes through the bottom head, and hits these little guys, and it makes a sound. And if you do this, and you put energy on top of it, you can hear it rattle, right? I like to do this, it's fun. Ah! It's a fun sound. I do that all the time. That's serious. I'm tuning a kid's bottom head and I'll just scream because it's fun. Anyway, so these rattle and they make that snary sound. We'll eventually tune them, but for now, we're going to take them off. So how you take them off? On a Pearl, it's actually super easy. Just flip that thing up. Mm-hmm. And this guy actually creates tension across. So if I spin it, it'll create more tension. If I spin it the other way, it'll loosen it, and what that does functionally is it creates a higher pitch of sound, or a lower pitch essentially. And it creates a little bit more of that dry sound versus warm, long sound.
Yeah.
So you take them off. One thing, I've been tuning drums 15 years, and I have to make sure I put this down the right way.
So that you don't forget which direction it goes?
Yeah, that's one of the worst things, is sometimes I just put the bottom head on, I'm going to put the snares back on, but if it's this way, it's not going to fit. You'll sit there for 5 minutes wondering why you can't screw the damn thing in.
Yep.
And it's because it should have been this way. So I'm very meticulous about making sure
that way.
I lay it that way, so I can't mess it up.
I definitely won't turn it over.
Yeah. Please don't. And as we can tell, that's not the highest pitch thing. So we're taking that off. All right, here we are. So now we're putting the bottom head on. And again, you can put this bad boy wherever you want. I just keep it consistent with the top head, so I kind of put it just along the guts here. Pro tip, don't be stupid. Put the little things where the snare bed will lay. Alright, so you lay it on. You want to make sure that the lugs are lying here on the rods nice and good. There they are. Alright, cool. Alright, so here we are. Alright, so the same thing as last time. I just go one by one, cranking it until it stops. I feel a little tension, and I give it a quarter turn. And I generally like I don't really do two at a time on the bottom head, at least when I'm putting it on. Because for me, it's just so much more delicate in terms of the amount of tension.
You don't want to...
I just want to be very methodical about every single one. All right, so same thing here. Put a lot of pressure, seat the head.
Real quick, how many of you all thought that it was this intensive to tune a drum? Comment below.
Nobody.
So at this point, they're all pretty, and you can kind of feel, like that's the only thing you can do, just to make sure you can kind of press with your thumbs and just kind of feel, make sure they're all pretty similar. Now one thing I will say, if you're ever putting a bottom head on, this part where the snares go will always naturally be a little less tight and a little lower in pitch, just for whatever reason, because the rim doesn't continue.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it just doesn't create as much tension, or so just know like these should sound pretty much the same. These will normally be a little looser and a little lower. All right, so from here, one thing we'll want to do, you can use your key if you want to. Or you can use a stick, which I use. Right, you can kind of hear the pitch that's coming out. What's very important, and what I see a lot of people do, which doesn't make sense to me, is they'll just kind of hit around it and like hope it's the same. But literally, if you hit here on one lug, you move half an inch inside, it sounds completely different.
Oh yeah.
Right, so if you're just going around like this, hoping that it sounds the same, you'll never know.
Oh yeah.
Right.
No.
So what I'm very methodical about is I want to make sure that I'm hitting the same spot on every lug.
Same distance from the rim.
The same distance from the rim.
Yep.
Whereas sometimes you'll hit here, you'll hit here, you'll think it's low. It's not. You just hit in the wrong spot. Right.
Exactly.
So as I come to the center and I get away from the tension, it's going to sound lower.
Yep.
So don't trick yourself, and you have to be very intentional about where you do this, right? So what I do at this point, and again, I will never be perfect. I spent years trying to make every single one perfect, and it's more harm than good. So just get it close, and it's gonna sound fun. Especially when you got 7, 8, 9 snare drums, 5 snare drums.
Yeah.
And what I actually use is I use buzzes when I hit this,
Yeah.
right? Because if you hit it, you can hear overtones. You can, depending on what your ear's hearing, you can hear a bunch of different notes. So
Yep.
I kind of just do little buzzes, like very soft in the hand. And just, so that one's a little low. And just make sure, that they're pretty close in pitch. So this one to me felt a little low. Right, so I'll just spot check. And if they're off, you just want to put just a little bit of pressure. We're not talking quarter turns. If you do a quarter turn like we were doing before, you're going to go way too high.
Yeah.
So if you hear one that's a little off, just a little baby. So actually that sounds pretty decent, I would say. All those lugs are pretty close. That one's a little low. Yeah, so as we said, these will be a little bit lower.
But you want those 4 to sound similar.
Yeah, we want these 4 to sound similar.
Versus these 8 on the ends.
Correct. So we'll kind of let it sit. Did you turn this over?
No.
Alright.
Of course not.
If you did, we're going to be here all night, baby. Alright, cool. You put it back on, you screw it. So, when it comes to the snare mechanism, there are two things. There is this little latch that goes up and down, and that essentially engages the snares or disengages the snares. Actually, there's three things, I apologize. Right, so that's that. Also, there's this one that we talked about before that creates tension this way. Right, so it stretches the snares that way. The tighter it is, the higher it is. The looser it is, the lower it is. The wider it is generally. And then the third thing is this little guy down here. And I don't know the official terms for these things. I just use the word thing. But this one you twist, and it controls up and down. So if you look really quickly, you can see this little guy going up.
Yep.
And it should be above the head at this point. So it's not really contacting the head, so you're not ever going to hear a snare response.
Yep.
And if you twist it the other way, I don't know if you got a good angle, it'll eventually become flush with the top of the head.
And if you kept going, it'll.
Yeah, and if you keep going,
it'll be lower.
You'll see it get lower, and there's a little angle. Right? See that? You don't want to do that. That's going to damage the snares, and for me, that's going to create a harshish sound.
Too much snare pressure.
Exactly. Too much snare pressure will make your snare drum sound more like the tabletop that we're talking about. Right? So we don't quite want that much. So really just want it barely lying on. And you got to kind of get over here and look weird. Just make sure your eye is perfectly level. Boom. All right. And then you can kind of tap it. And if it's not in line, or if it's above it and you tap, well, you kind of hear that slappy sound because you're slapping the snare into the head. If it's perfectly on, you don't really hear that sound.
Gonna be that.
Yep, cool. And then what I do, this is something people do a lot, is they make their snares too tight across for me. So what I do is I'll put it on, I'll just kind of run my hand across it. I just kind of want to, I can't even quantify it, right?
It's just the TJ.
You just got it, it's just got to move a little bit. It's not that high right here. Like some people will crank it too much. And it'll feel like the snares aren't moving. That's just a little tight for me. So it's probably not as tight as you maybe think it should.
It's on your initial approach.
Exactly. All right, so that's just putting the snares on. That's how we'll do it. And then from here, we will tune each, what's that called? Snare or strand. That's a good word. Strand.
Yeah, strand.
So what I do is I will put a pencil or a pen. By the way, best pens in the world, Uniball Signio 207s.
Please sponsor us.
That's right, Uniball Signio 207. That's all you need. All right, put the pen in there, and what this will do is it'll create a little tension. It'll keep the snares up, and then you re-engage. And then if I pluck one of these, it'll sound
like a guitar.
Like a guitar, pretty much, right? So we're trying to get these all similar.
Yeah.
And they all come out of production fairly similar, but there will be a few wonky ones. And I don't really think about a specific note. I just think about maybe bringing them all up a smidge and keeping them close, right? Don't be overly picky about it. Again, these are things I did when I first started. I obsessed over. I spent hours trying to get every little thing sound perfect. It's not a big deal. Just get it close. So that's what we'll do. And normally most drums use a screwdriver. Looks like Pearl changed since the last time I tuned this Pearl drum, and they require an Allen wrench.
Is that a Pearl Allen wrench? Is that a Pearl key?
It is.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Pearl sells these.
I don't know. I think this is actually one of my students from Atlantic West. I think I stole it from Mason. I think this is Mason's actually.
All right. Mason, if you're watching, we're sorry.
All right, so here we go. And again, we'll just pluck. Lower. Higher. Right? So really, we're just trying to make it sound like the others.
Keep that phone here.
Okay, we got the second one close. There we go. All right, so pretty much that's just a small illustration of what you want to do. You want to kind of go one by one, make them all eventually sound close. Cool?
Yep.
All right, so that's that. From here, a lot of things I say may sound that they contradict themselves.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I want something a little more warm. Sometimes I want to do something to create a little bit more short of a sound.
Yep.
But it's all a balance, right? So that's kind of what we do. But for me, I throw a piece of tape on each side. I just gently put it down, maybe an inch from the rim. A, that there's good contact, good consistent contact with the head throughout, and B, that they're all kind of staying compact together, and that will help them kind of resonate the same way, and ring the same way when sound comes through. Cool, so that's the bottom head, and again, you can add more tape if you want, you can have no tape, whatever. So that's that. All right, so
back to the top.
Back to the top. All right, so one good thing that I do when I actually kind of start to fine tune the top is I turn the guts off, right? So the snares, right, how they can be on or off, I turn them off because that's another variable that can affect the top head, right? And another variable that can affect what the top head sounds like if you hit it too hard. If I hit it too hard, I'm gonna start hearing the bottom head.
Correct.
So when I'm tuning the top head, I do tiny little buzzes again, and just make sure each one is close. Right? And it's less important on the top than it is at the bottom, probably. But again, I just try to get rid of as many variables as possible from the specific thing I'm trying to tune, which right now is the top. So I just want to hear just lug by lug. So that one's a little lower. Hear that? Right? So I'll just give it a little baby crank. Oh, that's better. Again, maybe a little lower there. That one's maybe a smidge low. So we come up a bit. That one's low. Alright, so really kind of what I just did is I just tried to match them again. Right? I just match them from where I left them, and now I'll probably take it up together. Maybe 2 clicks. Alright, so that's the top. And if we put it together, it's starting to sound a little bit more.
It's a lot closer to a snare drum.
Yeah, so it's still not what we probably shoot for. Still probably a little low, particularly on the top. But it's certainly on its way there.
Yeah.
So really what we'll do from here is I'll probably fine tune it over the next day. Try to put a little more attention slowly, as I said before. You don't want to put too much at one time. I think the most important thing for day one is just getting the heads close to themselves. Making sure each lug is similar to themselves. Letting it sit. If you've got like a day-long rehearsal, if you're running an independent group, maybe touch it up as you go. But again, don't try to get this sounding perfect in 3 hours. And tomorrow, I'll talk a little bit more about the note that I shoot for on the bottom. Normally like a C sharp to a D. Obviously, it's not there yet. And I'll talk about where you need to listen for that note. Because a lot of people say, hey, you need a C sharp, you need a D on the bottom. What does that mean? A lot of people don't know what that means.
No, there's a lot of notes.
There's a lot of notes that you hear depending on where you hit, right?
Exactly.
So I'll kind of show you my trick to make sure I'm hearing the predominant sound.
Awesome.
The next day.
All right, we're here on day 2, picking up the drum and tuning it. So here we go.
So as we discussed yesterday, you can't bring it up too fast. Mainly the bottom head, just in fear of pulling it. So over yesterday, I brought it up a little bit more. Over today, I brought it a little bit more. Normally, if you're tuning this for like your local high school, you probably have like a rehearsal, Tuesday and Thursday. So maybe you put them on Monday, crank them a little bit. Probably by the Thursday, they'll sound really good.
Perfect.
So we're getting there. So really on the top, you don't really need to shoot for a note. Some people do. They want a specific note. Some people want it they want it to relate to the bottom head's note a little bit. The bottom to like a C sharp or a D, depending on the head you have on. And then the top, just so it feels okay. That actually sounds pretty decent. It sounds decent. The bottom, just a little pro tip, we're shooting for like a C sharp or a D. Depending on where you hit this thing, you're gonna hear a bunch of different notes. So for me, the easiest way to make sure I'm hearing the predominant note is I just kind of treat it like a conga. I just kind of slap it with my fingers. And like that note is the note you want to shoot for. Snare sounding good. That's it. That's
Awesome.
how you tune a snare drum.
Awesome.
Bam.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Sounds great.